I was 16, navigating the challenging waters of my junior year in high school. The days were long, and the pressure was mounting, but like every other student, I found solace in the small pockets of downtime during the day. My school day was packed with 9 periods, and fifth period was a much-needed break for lunch. Right after that, I had astronomy, a class that, despite being interesting, was held in one of the two basement classrooms of the school. Our high school was sprawling, 3 stories of bustling students and teachers, but even that wasn't enough to accommodate all the classes offered. The school had to improvise, converting an old janitorial section of the basement into 2 makeshift classrooms. They tried to dress it up with fresh paint and brighter lights, but the basement retained a certain eerie quality, especially when it was empty. There were no intercoms or loudspeakers down there at the time, which meant that those of us with classes in the basement missed out on the morning announcements. Everyone referred to this part of the basement as the chamber. It was somewhat of a coveted spot for classes because it was air-conditioned, had its own bathroom, and the classes held there were known to be a bit more relaxed. On this particular day, we had a quiz in astronomy. I usually finished these quizzes quickly because I found the material easy, and this day was no exception. After completing my quiz, I texted my friend, who was in the other basement classroom, to meet me in the bathroom because I was bored. He agreed, and a few minutes later, I walked out of the classroom and headed down the short hallway to the bathroom. A few seconds later, the door opened and my friend Tyler walked in. We were joking around, passing the time, when Tyler checked his phone. His expression changed as he read a message that had just come in. "Dude, someone just texted me that the school is going on lockdown," he said, looking up at me with a mix of excitement and nervousness. We exchanged grins, the kind that only 2 bored teenagers could share when presented with something out of the ordinary. The fact that neither of our teachers saw us leave the classrooms meant we had free reign of the school while it was on lockdown. We agreed to sneak upstairs and check out the hallways, just for the thrill of it. After all, the worst that could happen was that we'd get caught, and we could easily explain that we didn't hear the lockdown announcement in the basement. It seemed like a harmless adventure. As we opened the door leading from the basement to the main floor, we were immediately struck by the darkness. All the lights in the hallways had been turned off, leaving the corridors shrouded in shadow, save for the faint light seeping in from the lobby doors. This was unusual. Normally, the lights were left on during lockdowns. The pitch-black hallways made us hesitate. Something felt off, and the playful excitement we had felt just moments ago started to fade. Tyler stepped out a bit further into the hallway, and I followed, my nerves on edge. Suddenly, Tyler stopped and squinted down the hall. "Who's that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. I looked in the direction he was staring and saw a figure emerging from the darkness. At first, we couldn't tell if it was a teacher or a staff member, but as the person got closer, it became clear that this was no one we recognized. He was dressed in ragged clothes, looking like he hadn't showered in days. "Let's get out of here," I whispered urgently to Tyler, and we hurried back down to the basement, our hearts racing. Whoever that guy was, he had definitely seen us, and we didn't want to stick around to find out what he was up to. When we got back to the basement, we saw that both classrooms had their doors shut and lights off. Not wanting to make a scene, we decided to hide in the bathroom. I quickly shut off the light, and we both squeezed into the corner stall, trying to control our breathing. The silence in the bathroom was deafening. There was no sound except for the occasional drip from the sink and our own anxious breaths. The tension was unbearable. We both jumped when the bathroom door suddenly creaked open, and a sliver of light from the hallway spilled into the room before the door swung shut again, plunging us back into darkness. We listened intently, our senses heightened by fear. The sound of footsteps slowly made their way across the bathroom floor, moving closer to our stall. The person's breathing was heavy, almost as if they had been running. Tyler and I exchanged a panicked glance, our hearts pounding in our chests. Then Tyler made a mistake. He leaned close to me and whispered, "We need to crawl out through the other stalls." His whisper was barely audible, but in the deathly quiet of the bathroom, it might as well have been a shout. The heavy breathing outside the stall stopped abruptly, and we heard the sound of the stall door being pushed, as if the person was trying to get in. "Go," I hissed at Tyler, and we both scrambled to crawl under the sidewall to the next stall. We moved as quickly as we could, crawling from one stall to the next, our hearts racing. The person outside started banging on the stall door, the sound echoing through the bathroom. My pulse quickened as we finally made it to the last stall and slipped out the other side. We bolted for the door, throwing it open just as the light from the hallway illuminated the bathroom. I glanced back and saw the man from upstairs standing in the corner, his eyes wide with surprise and anger. We pounded on the door to Tyler's classroom, and the teacher let us in within seconds. Tyler was breathless as he explained what had happened, mentioning that he thought he saw a gun sticking out of the man's pocket. I hadn't noticed a gun, but I didn't doubt Tyler's claim. The teacher's face paled as he listened, his hands shaking slightly as he locked the door and instructed everyone to stay quiet. The students who usually would have found something like this amusing were deadly serious, their eyes filled with fear. Suddenly, there was a loud bang at the door, causing everyone to jump and a few girls to squeal in terror. Tyler, the teacher, and I could see the man standing at the door, peering through the window as he tried the doorknob. He banged on the door again, harder this time, and I could see the frustration and anger in his eyes. After a few more bangs, he turned and walked away, disappearing back down the hallway. We didn't know how much longer the lockdown lasted, but it felt like an eternity. The room was silent, except for the occasional whispered question from the teacher, who seemed more concerned with what we had seen than with calming the other students. Eventually, someone from upstairs called the teacher, and he instructed us to line up and walk single file up the stairs and out of the building, where we were greeted by police officers. Tyler and I did our best to describe the man to the cops and the dean. One of the officers patted me on the back and told us we did a good job before sending us home. After that incident, the school installed cameras in the hallways and significantly increased the security budget. The incident never made the news, so we never found out if the police caught the guy, but I'm convinced he had every intention of hurting us in that bathroom stall. I'm a retired police officer from New Jersey. Over my 20-year career, I handled countless cases, but there's one that still haunts me to this day. It was a stormy, dark afternoon when I received a call about a school lockdown at a nearby middle school. A suspicious man had been seen stepping out of a white van parked behind the school and entering the building through the back door by the boys' locker room. When I arrived at the school, the parking lot was empty except for the white van. The doors and trunk were locked, and there was no sign of anyone inside. I unholstered my flashlight and cautiously approached the red back door that led into the gym hallway. The main lights had been turned off, leaving the inside of the school in near complete darkness. I felt a chill run down my spine as I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The hallway was eerily quiet, the only sound being the faint hum of the ventilation system. I moved slowly, shining my flashlight around, trying to make sense of the situation. The tension in the air was palpable, and I knew I had to be careful. The suspect might be armed, and I didn't want to take any chances. I made my way to the lobby, where a woman from the front office emerged, whispering frantically for me to check the boys' locker room. She was visibly shaken, her eyes wide with fear. I called for backup on my radio, but they were still minutes away. It was just me alone in a dark school, with a potentially dangerous man somewhere nearby. The boys' locker room was right next to the exit I had entered through. I pushed the door open quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. The locker room was pitch black, the only light coming from my flashlight. There was a faint white noise in the room, likely from a vent on the ceiling, but over that, I could hear faint scratching sounds and the occasional ping of something hitting a locker door. Every fiber of my being told me to announce my presence as a police officer, but fear kept me silent. The tension in the room was overwhelming, and I felt like I was walking into a trap. I held my flashlight in one hand and my gun in the other as I moved deeper into the room, trying to pinpoint the source of the noises. It seemed like every time I moved, the sound shifted to the other side of the room. My nerves were on edge, and I had to fight the urge to turn around and leave. But then, the sound of a locker door slamming shut in the adjacent football team locker room made me jump. I turned in that direction, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. There was no door separating the main locker room from the football locker room, and the lockers in here were much larger. I knew I had to make my presence known, so I shouted, "Police!" My voice echoed off the metal lockers, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, a child's voice called out, "Help!" The voice was muffled, as if the boy was trapped. I followed the sound to a row of lockers, and when I found the source, my heart sank. A young boy was locked inside one of the lockers, pounding on the door in desperation. I told him I'd be right back and sprinted back outside to check the van. My biggest mistake was not getting the license plate number when I first arrived. By the time I made it back to the parking lot, the van was gone. I frantically called dispatch, telling them to be on the lookout for a suspicious white van. I ran back into the school, instructing the front office staff to end the school day immediately and send someone with a key to unlock the locker. The boy was bleeding from a wound on his arm, likely from the man's knife as he tried to resist being forced into the locker. The man had planned to abduct the boy and take him to his van, but luckily, I arrived before he could carry out his plan. The man's van was spotted a week later at a 7-Eleven parking lot. He was arrested and properly identified as the suspect. The boy was shaken but ultimately unharmed, and I was left with the chilling memory of what could have happened if I had arrived just a few minutes later. I was staying at a Hampton Inn in New Jersey while visiting Rowan University, a college I was considering attending. My family couldn't make the trip, so I was on my own. After spending the day on campus tours, I grabbed dinner at a nearby restaurant and returned to the hotel around 8 p.m., planning to go back to the campus the next day. About an hour after returning to my room, a strange alarm started blaring, accompanied by a bright white light flashing from the corner of the ceiling. A recorded message began playing, repeating every 20 seconds or so. "Attention all Hampton Inn guests, please remain in your rooms. This is a lockdown." I had never heard of a hotel going into lockdown, and the situation was more intriguing than frightening at first. The alarm eventually stopped, but the flashing light continued, and the message kept looping. It was only 9:30, so I decided to watch some TV while I waited for the situation to resolve itself. I changed into my pajamas, brushed my teeth, and got comfortable under the covers, still half expecting the situation to be resolved at any moment. But the light kept flashing, an obnoxious bright white that filled the room every few seconds, making it difficult to relax. I was considering calling the front desk to ask what was going on when the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting the hotel staff to explain the situation, but instead the voice on the other end was panicked. "Sir, you need to remain calm and leave your room immediately," the woman on the phone instructed. My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" I asked, suddenly feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Her voice trembled as she replied, "There's someone in your room with you. Get out now." The phone slipped from my hand, my body frozen in fear as I processed what she had just said. Instinctively, I started looking around the room, my eyes darting from corner to corner. I checked under the bed, my heart racing, but there was nothing there. The bathroom was empty too. But then I noticed the closet door slightly ajar. It was one of those closets with a wooden sliding door, and it was open just a tiny crack. Through that crack, I saw a face staring back at me. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind struggled to comprehend the reality of it, but when the door slid shut, I realized with horrifying clarity that there was indeed someone in my room. I bolted for the door, adrenaline surging through my veins. I yanked it open and sprinted down the hallway, not stopping until I reached the front desk. The staff immediately showed me security footage from an hour earlier. A man had been wandering the halls, appearing to be looking for a specific room. When he reached my door, he used a key card to enter. The footage sent a chill down my spine. The man had been in my room for over an hour, hiding in the closet, watching me the entire time. I waited around as the police arrived and eventually took the man out in handcuffs. He was in his 40s, short, with a menacing look in his eyes. As he passed me, he smirked, as if he knew exactly who I was. The thought of how long he had been watching me, planning who knows what, still haunts me to this day. I'll never forget the moment I realized that there was someone else in the room, hidden just out of sight. Love creepy stories? Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one. Our email is in the description. Please send in your horror stories.